Hello, this is Captain Chaudhari. In my last video, I talked about the liability of the carrier, right? And also about the burden of proof. Here, we'll talk about a few more things about the liability. We were comparing Hague-Wisby rules with Hamburg rules. So we will compare the two rules in respect of deviation now. What is deviation? Now, deviation is actually not defined in Hamburg rules, but there is a reference made to deviation in Article 5, Paragraph 6. It says the carrier is not liable except in general average where loss, damage or delay in delivery resulted from measures to save life or from reasonable measures to save property at sea. Now here the Hamburg rules talk about the liability, whether the carrier is liable or not liable in case of deviation. Even if he is not liable, he is contributory to the general average. But there are situations where he will not be liable, and those situations are when there is a deviation to save life, number one, or there is a reasonable deviation to save property. It goes without saying that if there is unreasonable deviation to save property, then the carrier will be liable. He is not liable only if it is a reasonable deviation in respect of saving the property. Now here we must also notice two things. The hidden things are, like if there is delay and there is no damage to goods, still the carrier is accountable because there is a breach of contract when there is delay, even if the cargo is not damaged, even if the goods are intact. Now the second point to note is, even if the carrier is not liable, right? If the goods get damaged or there is loss, the carrier still has to show that he has taken reasonable measures to prevent any damage or loss. Now let's head for Hague-Wisby rules. The provisions in Hague-Wisby rules are much broader, in respect of deviation. One of the exceptions, one of the 17 exceptions in Article 4, it says that the carrier or the ship is not liable for the damage that results from attempting to save life or property out at sea. That means saving the life and property is given equal weightage under Hague-Wisby rules. That is number one. And it does not talk about ordinary attempt or a reasonable attempt. It just says that attempting to save life or property out at sea. Also, paragraph 4 of Article 4 says any deviation in saving or attempting to save life or property at sea, or any reasonable deviation shall not be deemed to be an infringement or breach of these rules or of the contract of carriage, and the carrier shall not be liable for any loss or damage resulting therefrom. This means that in Hague-Wisby rule, if there is a reasonable deviation, we are not talking about saving the life or property. If there is any other reasonable deviation, right, still that reasonable deviation will not be considered as infringement of contract of carriage. Now let's see what the two rules say about delay. Right? In Hague-Wisby rule, there is no specific mention of delay. It does not talk about delay. Delay was introduced in Hamburg rules. So in Hague-Wisby rule, can they make a contract? Can the shipper and the carrier make a contract or agreement in respect of delay? Yes, they can, because there is possibility that a contract be made between the two parties as long as it is not reducing the liabilities or responsibilities of the carrier. You can go for the contract. It would be valid. But the thing is, like you can stipulate that the goods have to be delivered by this date, or you can create a window by which the goods must be delivered. Now, because the rules are silent about delay, just that the goods are delayed and there is no damage to the goods, nothing will happen. But if the goods are delayed and because of the delay or otherwise the goods get damaged, then courts will probably hold the carrier responsible for that, because probably the carrier has not acted with diligence. Eventually the goods are damaged. You are not caught for the delay, but damage that is caused because of delay, you might be responsible for that. Article 5, Basis of Liability. Paragraph 2 says delay in delivery occurs when the goods have not been delivered at the port of discharge provided for in the contract of carriage by sea within the time expressly agreed upon, or in the absence of such agreement within the time which it would be reasonable to require of a diligent carrier having regard to the circumstances of the case. So there is a mention of diligent carrier. Diligent carrier means he would, in absence of the specific stipulation about the time, the carrier would decide that I must deliver the goods by this date, otherwise it could be considered as delayed. So that provision is also there in Hamburg rule. The provision of diligent carrier to decide what is delay. Paragraph 3 says the person entitled to make a claim for the loss of goods may treat the goods as lost if they have not been delivered as required by the Article 4 within 60 consecutive days following the expiry of the time for delivery according to the paragraph above. Limits of liability. Let's see what the two rules say about limits of liability. The Hamburg rule says that the carrier will not be responsible for an amount more than 835 units of account per package or 2.5 units of account per gross kg of the goods that is lost or damaged. That means the carrier will not be held responsible for the loss or damage that is caused to the goods by more than this amount that is stipulated. And then it goes on to say that the two, that is the carrier and the shipper, they may agree about an amount exceeding this amount of 835 or 2.5, which I said just now. An agreement can be made in respect of the limitation of liability amount, but it cannot be less than 835. It has to be exceeding 835 units of account. So now let us see what paragraph 5a of Article 4 of Hague rule say about the limitation of liability amount. It says that unless the nature and value of the goods have been declared prior shipment in the bills of lading, that means the bills of lading becomes ad valorem bills of lading. Unless the nature and value has been declared, right? Neither the carrier nor the ship would be responsible for loss or damage to the cargo by an amount more than 666.67 units of account per package or 2 units of account per kg of gross weight, whichever is higher. It also says that the two can agree for an amount which will not be less than this amount, right? The two can have a contract, and this provision is similar in Hamburg rules also. But here it says one more thing. It says that the value that is declared by the shipper is prima facie evidence, but it is not binding or conclusive on the carrier. Now, Article 6, paragraph A and B of Hamburg rule must be understood well. It says that in case there is delay, as we know Hamburg rules talk about delay, in case there is delay, then the amount of liability that arises on the carrier will not be more than 2.5 times the freight that is earned on the goods which are delayed. However, this limit cannot be more than the total freight that is earned by the ship. This is one benchmark above which you cannot hold the carrier liable. In the other paragraph, it says that the aggregate of the liability, whether you are talking about delay or you are talking about loss or damage, the total aggregate liability which will arise over the carrier will not be more than the limitation of liability amount that is provided. That means we earlier talked about 835 units of account or 2.5 units of account per kg of gross weight. It cannot be more than that. Now let us compare the two rules in respect of losing the right to limit the liability. That means there will be unlimited liability. So what does Hamburg rule say in Article 8? It says that the carrier will lose the right to limit liability if it can be proved that the damage, the loss or delay in delivery was caused because of act or omission of the carrier done with the intent of causing such loss, damage or delay, or recklessly with the knowledge that probably such loss, damage or delay would probably result. So this is what is stated in Hamburg rules. Hague-Visby rules say similar thing. It says that neither the ship nor the carrier would be able to limit the liability if it can be proved that the loss or damage, it does not talk about delay, loss or damage was caused by act or omission of the carrier done with the intent of causing such loss or damage. Right? Although it says about loss, it talks about loss of cargo. It does not talk about financial loss, which is implied in Hamburg rules. So here we talk about loss or damage done with the intent of causing such loss or damage, or recklessly with the knowledge that probably such loss or damage would occur, would probably result. So this is what is stated in Hague-Visby rule. So the fine difference is, in the Hamburg rule, it might be talking about loss of right to limit the liability in respect of delay. Now, in respect of delay, the limited liability is 2.5 times the freight earned for the goods which are delayed, or the total freight. If the carrier is not able to limit the liability as above, then what happens? He is liable for unlimited liability. Will he be liable for the financial losses which are not defined? So that's a big question to answer. Now let's talk about Hague-Visby rules, where they talk about finding out the value of goods, right? If you have to find out what is the total liability, unlimited liability in respect of goods. So it says that the value of the goods will be determined by the commodity exchange rate, commodity exchange price. In absence of commodity exchange price, the market price of the goods. In case the commodity exchange price or the market price is not determined or determinable, then it will be found by the normal value of the goods which are of similar quality or similar nature. Right? So that is how you determine what is the value of the goods in Hague-Visby rule. There is no similar provision of determining the value of the goods in Hamburg rules.